Hello and welcome to the Inner Courts of the Beautiful. We were looking at the facets of the sun, the many manifestations of Surya as the Adityas. Today we will look at the Aditya as seen when sun enters the sign of Gemini. The Aditya that's known when sun enters Gemini is Mitra Aditya. Usually this is seen in the months between the mid of June going all the way up to the mid of July. Mitra, as the name suggests, indicates friendship, and hence Mitra Aditya rules all the aspects that govern the nature of friendship and all the implications of what friendship means and what it entails. Mitra Aditya is the one that gifts us with the ability to have agreeable pacts, agreements, have negotiations, have a coming together of different social groups, people, the social laws that come along with it. And also, it rules certain very interesting and very important areas that in some ways connect to our ability to create our own fate, which was something that I referred to in my earlier discussion on Savitur Aditya, the giver of Dhi Shakti. Because when it comes to doing something, the association of doing with our own hands is something that Mitra Aditya governs. One of the key things is it rules what we call as Kara. Kara is literally the hands. And with the use of one's hands, particularly when we say hands, we're talking about the palms. When we use our palms, we do things in terms of the action of doing. So the kara results in the karya, which is the actions entailing from doing. And this in turn results in karma, that is actions that one has performed oneself. And when these three follow, what happens is you are creating by yourself. The creation is yours. And when one creates, in effect, one is taking charge, and that is where the idea of free will operates. And of course, for one to be able to do such actions and create, it has other implications in terms of having the capability, the skills, and of course the motivation and the courage to perform actions. All of these are governed by Mitra Aditya. Mitra Aditya, one of the defining qualities we just saw was about him being known as a friend, Mitra. And with the blessing of Mitra Aditya, there are certain other qualities that are usually seen when one sees this sun in Germany, the blessings of Mitra Aditya, there's a certain youthful quality about them. There's a brightness of intellect, a shimmering quality to the intellect, and it rests very easy in the sense that usually when Mitra Aditya blesses someone, you would see a very easy sense of humor and joy and youthfulness, almost a sense of mischief, you could say, but in a very positive way. And one of the very well-known Mitras that we know, friends, he was in fact Vishwamitra, the Brahma Rishi Vishwamitra. So literally the friend of the universe. The reason we refer to him as Vishwamitra, because the Brahma Rishi Vishwamitra gifted us with the very legendary and cherished mantra, the Gayatri mantra. The Gayatri mantra was given out of compassion. At that time, he wanted to share it with the world, but there was a motivation for him at that point in time when he was the king of the Bharatas or the Kaushikas. At that time, he was known as the king Vishwarath. And Vishwarath was married to an Ashura by the name of Ugra, and he wanted to elevate the level of consciousness. And this is not just for her, I mean, that is anecdotal, but this is for everyone, for all of us, to raise the level of consciousness, to create that level of Dhi Shakti where one is able to create one's own universe, one's own fate, and hence takes charge and creates one's own universe. And in that sense, what I just told you about Mitra Aditya governing the idea of free will connects with the concept of having the Dhi Shakti and hence creating one's own fate. And that is exactly what the Gayatri mantra does, and hence he was known as Vishwamitra. So perhaps it's not a coincidence that we see there. Mitra Aditya governs social engagement. So when we say social engagement, all the mode of engagement, the pacts that we make, the nature we relate to people, groups of people, and which eventually is formalized as agreements. It could even be an agreement that's arrived at and agreed upon orally, or it could be formalized. All of these agreements are governed by Mitra Aditya. And when such agreements are arrived at, there's a greater deal of trust that it enables. And there is a clear understanding of the nature of engagement, the rules of engagement, the mode of social practices, and so on. So in that sense, Mitra Aditya becomes one of the governors of ritas or social laws, specifically the social laws relating to pacts and agreements. This, of course, also scales up at the level of cultural exchanges and even social engagements. So we see a situation where at another level, Mitra Aditya eventually governs even this ability to create a sense of attraction between people, leading to physical intimacy. Even that is Mitra Aditya's ambit, and hence he is the one who rules vitality in people. This ability to have a sense of attraction and have create a sense of vitality in relationships. So here we are talking about one-to-one relationships, which is Mitra Aditya's ambit here. There's a very interesting connection because Gemini is the natural third house, which is Mitra Aditya's area of play, and the natural third house is the ninth house from the seventh. I mean, for those interested in astrology, there's a bit of insight here, because the seventh, as those who know astrology would know, has to do with marriage, and it's the Kalatra Bhava. So it has to do with marriage, partnerships, and so on. And the ninth house, as we know, is the house of dharma, or the rules of engagement, so to say, or what is correct in that context. So the ninth house from the seventh, which is to say that the dharma of the seventh house falls in the third house, 9 from 7. So what that means is physical intimacy becomes part of the dharma of marriage. And of course, we see that in practice, in terms of law, marriages can get annulled when there is, the incompatibility or whatever levels of, lack of seeing equitably on this issue between the partners who are married. So this is something that the law recognizes, and that comes about because of this. Like I mentioned, Mitrā Adityā governs laws and rules and agreements, and also he rules the area of physical intimacy. Now, besides this, Mitrā Adityā also governs another area. See, when there's a great deal of trust and great deal of exchange in terms of ideas and so on, the refinement in terms of social practices also goes up, and which is the reason Mitrā Adityā gives natives who have Sun and Gemini a very acute sense of almost activism, the sensitivity towards human rights, sensitivity towards eco-friendliness, sensitivity towards being vegetarian even. So these are all very cherished areas which the Mitrā Adityā promotes, and that can be seen with people who have Sun and Gemini. And one of the things that we need to keep in mind is, while Mitrā Adityā goes about fostering this kind of friendship and pacts and coming together of groups of people and so on, there is a very paradoxical situation here as well, because we should not forget, in the end, Mitrā Adityā is a manifestation of Surya, and Surya is blazing ball of fire in the end of the day. So Mitrā Adityā has this very paradoxical quality, where the people who have Sun in Gemini, the Sun seems to burn away their relationships. So in that sense, the Sun burns away their individual personal ability to have relationship, and hence creates a situation where many of these Mitrā Adityā governed people tend to be loners of some sort, or in some area of the life that this Sun and Gemini governs. So you have the situation now, coming back to Vishwamitra that we spoke about. We all know that Vishwamitra, he is famous in a very legendary sense for his temper. And in that sense, Vishwamitra, he performed great penances again and again, because they say Vishwamitra is one of those rishis who is really a role model of sorts, because he's shown us all the way to not go about trying to attain the highest evolution of the soul, because he has perhaps gone through all the mistakes that one can do in his quest to become the Brahma Rishi. So in the process also, what happened was Vishwamitra was quite a loner. This will be a good time to look at some of the case studies related to Mitrā Adityā to get a deeper insight into how he works. Let's look at the case of Aung San Suu Kyi. As most of you know, she is a politician, a writer, a human rights activist. She is also a Nobel Peace Laureate. She was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991. But of course, there's a very, very, very interesting backdrop to this. In 1990, when she won the elections, democratically held elections, she was not allowed to take over the reins of the government by the military, and so she was instead put under a house arrest. And she had a situation where she did not, kind of provoke her supporters to go on a rampage. Instead, she just decided that the correct way would be to choose very non-violent means, and she remained under arrest for a significant period of time. And of course, this was something that the world recognized, and hence she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. But subsequently, there has been quite a roller coaster ride, so to say. And why would that be? Let's look at that. See, in her chart, this is again for those who would be keen on understanding from the point of view of Jyotisha or astrology. Her sun, which is in Gemini, also is conjoined by the very malefic Rahu and Saturn, along with Mercury. So we have a situation where we have four grahas or planets conjoined in Gemini. And the key exchange is between Rahu and Sun. So when Rahu and Sun have this kind of an engagement, we are essentially talking about an eclipse of the Sun. A grahana happens. So when you have such an eclipse, her Mitra Aditya is actually constantly being eclipsed by Rahu. So that's the challenge that she has. So now going back to the actual events, when she was again elected as the head of state of Myanmar, this is after she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize and celebrated as as a champion of peace. We had a situation where she was essentially came to a point where she became a global pariah of sorts. No one wanted to associate with her government because of the Rohingya Muslim crisis, the genocide of the Rohingya Muslims, and then all the journalists and critics being jailed and locked up and so on. So here you have a situation where it seemed to be diametrically opposite to what she was actually celebrated for. Now, why would that come about? That is exactly this eclipsing of the sun by Rahu. Now, Rahu interestingly represents all that is alien or strangers or usually foreigners, people from different cultures. So the Rohingya Muslims was essentially a cultural issue, not being accepted into the culture that was predominant in Myanmar, not accepting the Rohingya Muslims. So here you had a situation where that Rahu is indicating the Rohingya Muslims, so to say, and her sun being eclipsed as a result of that. So you have a situation where who was once celebrated as a champion of peace, being now in a situation where she is not quite as accepted as the champion that she once was. And also it is also in these times that whatever statements that she's made in the past comes into the forefront. She is known to have made a statement sometime in 2007 where she said that she chooses to adopt means of non-violence not for moral reasons but purely pragmatic or practical reasons. So it seems to kind of open up a new can of worms where the whole thing looks very different given what happened with the Rohingya crisis. So there you see Mitra Aditya's blessings have not been, she has the blessings of Mitra Aditya, but it constantly gets eclipsed because of the influence of Rahu. You should keep in mind, like I said, normally Sun in Germany, when Mitra Aditya is there, they would have a youthful look. Like that's something that we can recognize for someone at her age. She would still have a very youthful looks. That's a typical Mitra Aditya. So we're getting a sense of how that youthfulness of Mitra Aditya works. And there's a kind of a brightness about the the physical personality of the person itself, and ability to she, by the way, is someone who follows the Buddhist principles a lot. She's written about it. About the values of compassion and non-violence and so on. So these are something that she cherishes, that she wants to, but she always encounters a situation where Rahu eclipses, and hence she has to go through these phases of darkness, eclipse. Let's look at another personality with Sun in Gemini and the influence of Mitra Aditya and see how it works in this person's chart. Pamela Anderson. Pamela Anderson, as some of you might know, is a Canadian-American actress, model, a TV personality. Uh, she was the classic pin-up model, perhaps in the 80s, and she has a record of sorts in the sense that she was featured the most number of times on the Playboy magazine's cover. But what is perhaps lesser known is she's also a very committed activist, and she's taken up a lot of causes. Now, let's see if the Mitrā Adityā theme is playing in here. She first came into limelight when she took up the cause of PETA. PETA is the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, the group of people who have taken up the cause of the rights of animals and kind ethical treatment for animals. And she stripped herself down to for the cause of animal rights, and one of the ads for PETA, and of course it had its shock value, but there was something else going as well. I mean, from the point of view of insight that we have from the workings of Mitrā Adityā here. I was mentioning that Mitrā Adityā also has to do with the power of attraction, and also the natural third house being the Maithuna Bhava. Maithuna Bhava is literally a kind of a sexual attraction that one has. It's also the house of vitality and so on. Now, the cause that is for ethical treatment for animals and against animal cruelty. Now, again, that's something Mitrā Adityā a concern, in terms of animal rights, human rights, being ecologically friendly, and so on. So here you see both of these combining. She also was, an activist. She was a supporter of the Green Party of Canada, which is again a party that pushes a lot of these green causes, like sustainability, eco-friendliness, and related causes. And there's also another thing. She personally is a vegetarian as well. Apparently, when she was very young, she saw her father hunting down a deer, and she saw the carcass of the dead deer, and she chose to be a vegetarian from then on. So here we are beginning to see all of these themes are essentially the themes related to Mitrā Adityā. And of course, she uses also the way she looks to push these causes. So this is a classic case of all the Mitrā Adityā ingredients coming together in the case of Pamela Anderson. We have another very interesting case study of Nikola Tesla. And those of you who might have heard of Tesla, Tesla is one of the leading inventors. He was also a futurist. He was, of course, in the field of electrical and mechanical engineering predominantly. So let's have a understanding of how Mitrā Adityā has worked as far as Nikola Tesla is concerned. The brightness of intellect, that shimmering quality, and constantly being able to, in terms of intelligence, having that level of sharpness was something that was very evident in Tesla's life. He had about 300 recognized patents for his many inventions. Of course, the more popular ones are to do with the alternating current systems, the induction motor, and so on, but he also had many other contributions. And so in terms of his intelligence, of course, it was very apparent, very obvious, and that was predominant area in which he did most of his work. His work was all about application of his intelligence. But the lesser known stuff, which also relates to Mitrā Adityā here, he was someone who is supposed to have had a photographic memory. So if he were to just look at a book, he'll be able to flip through the pages and have an ability to absorb all of the information that contained in the book. That kind of a phenomenal ability in terms of grasping that level of intelligence is what Tesla had, and that was coming predominantly from Mitra Aditya, the sun being in Gemini in his chart. The other thing about Tesla, which was again a Mitra Aditya related theme, is he was a lifelong bachelor, but he had some very interesting ideas in terms of why he was a bachelor, because he believed that maintaining chastity was important in terms of being able to have that level of intellectual insight and also spiritual progress. So he was a lifelong bachelor, and the other thing is he also eventually became a vegetarian, essentially just having some bread, milk, honey and vegetables. That's it. So that's pretty much what he had. It was to that level he was a vegetarian. And more importantly, you again see the other Mitra Aditya theme working, which is about burning of relationships, because of this kind of brightness of light of Mitra Aditya. He was essentially a loner, and the later part of his life he literally lived out of various hotels. So he would stay in some hotels for a few days and then move to another hotel and stay for a few days. So you see here how Mitra Aditya is acting. He was someone who could contribute a lot with this sheer power of intelligence, and who had a great deal of strength in terms of his moral and ethical fiber, so to say, in his personality, but also the relationships getting burnt, coming as a kind of a collateral to having this blessing of Mitra Aditya. So this kind of a unique mix of qualities, but all these qualities reflecting the influence of Mitra Aditya. I'd like to bring the proceedings to a close on Mitra Aditya with a very shimmering personality, a much admired personality. In fact, one of the most admired personalities of the 21st century, the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama, as we know, was born in Tibet, and he was enthroned as Dalai Lama when he was still a very, very young little child. He was just 5 years of age, and he is believed to be, in the Tibetan tradition, the living incarnation of the Bodhisattva. So clearly we have someone here who embodies profound wisdom besides the intelligence. But with such profound intelligence and wisdom, you can still see a kind of a playful, youthful quality in the Dalai Lama. He has an ability to keep things very light, even when delivering the most profound wisdom, irrespective of who the audience or the person he's talking to. That's the Mitra Aditya quality of having that kind of a shimmering brilliance and youthfulness, almost a playfulness. And of course, he has had this natural curiosity, stemming from this kind of intelligence, and he has always had curiosity in science, astronomy, physics, and so on, and also in terms specifically the area of neuroscience. And those are areas where he's pushed for a lot of study and research. And besides that, also he has brought together a lot of interfaith dialogue, which is another intrinsic Mitra Aditya quality, where he's got religious heads from various faiths to come together, share philosophical thoughts and religious ideas, and bring about a foster sense of harmony amongst peoples. So that's something he's played a very active role. And besides that, also activism of sorts, so to say, when it comes to gender equality, also themes related to sexuality in terms of how one views these, and also animal rights. In fact, he's known to have remarked that most of us tend to view animals as vegetables, something that you simply grow and have it as food. So he's said that that's probably not the right way to go about it. He's encouraged people towards vegetarianism. You can see here all of these are the themes of Mitra Aditya. So there you have the very big influence of Mitra Aditya, shining in the form of the Dalai Lama. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of on Mitra Aditya, and till we take up another Aditya next week, I hope you have a good week, and thanks for joining me. Take care.